Welcome to Novelist Spotlight. This is Mike Consul, your host. In addition to being the host of this podcast and interviewing novelists, I am a novelist myself. I have 3 published novels. My latest is titled Lolita Firestone, a supernatural novel, and it is set in Sedona, Arizona and Cairo, Egypt. My previous novel is titled Family Recipes, a novel about Italian culture, Catholic guilt, and the culinary crime of the century. And my first novel is named Hardwood, a novel about college basketball and other games young men play, and that story deals with issues ranging from depression and racism to sex, religion, and university politics. All 3 novels are listed in the episode notes. I hope you will buy them, I hope you will read them, and I hope you will thoroughly enjoy them. Now, on with our program. In the spotlight is Joanna Penn, who teaches how to write, publish, and market your book, and make a living with your writing. She's an award-nominated New York Times and USA Today bestselling author with more than 35 published books, most of them novels, and almost 1 million sold across 169 countries in 5 different languages. She is also a podcaster, international speaker, and entrepreneur. But it hasn't always been this way for Joanna Penn. She was an IT consultant for 13 years for large corporations in Europe and Asia. Though well-employed, she was determined to become a full-time novelist and accomplished that feat in September 2011. She is based in Bath, England, a place that I have visited and recommend to everyone. Beautiful town with Roman canals, Roman baths that are still there and accessible. They're filled with hot water from underground springs. It's amazing. It's the Roman Empire meets Mother England over there. Highly recommended again. In February 2011, she published her first thriller, and that was titled Pentecost, later republished as Stone of Fire. There are now 11 books in the ARKANE action-adventure thriller series described by readers as Dan Brown meets Lara Croft. And then on from there, as I said, more than 24, almost 36 books. Her favorite authors include John Connolly, Stephen King, Jonathan Mayberry, Lee Child, and James Rollins. Joanna Penn, welcome to the program.
Oh, thanks for having me, Mike. It's good to be here, and I'm glad you like my city.
I love your city. I love your accent. I always love a British accent. All Americans do. I have to start by asking, is Penn a pen name? Because it's perfect for an author. Is it a pen name or is it your true name or married name?
No, it is my actual maiden name. I was born a Penn, so I was born for it as such. Although it's interesting, most of the rest of my family are visual artists. So my dad is a printmaker, my brother's a photographer and filmmaker, another brother is a designer, another sister designs textiles and interiors. So I feel like I'm the writer, and everyone else does different media. But yes, born as a Penn, and really only claimed that sort of later in my life.
And you, obviously it was meant to be. And you do so many different things all around creativity and writing and teaching about writing. For our listeners, the URL to Joanna's website is in the episode notes. There's all kinds of content there. I could have gone on and on with this introduction, but I wanted to make sure that we had time to have a conversation here. Joanna, you have are you a both traditional and self-published author? Did you start with self-publishing? Were you did you go the traditional route right off the bat? Give us some sense of that. And also maybe broaden out beyond yourself, because you interview a lot of people on your podcast. You know a lot of authors, and some of them prefer self-publishing, correct?
Yes, so for myself, I guess back in 2006, I started writing my first nonfiction book, which I later republished as Career Change. And so that was a book about changing careers. And I started writing it, and then I started looking into the publishing industry. I was living in Australia at the time, and I'd been running my own businesses for a long time. So I just couldn't believe how long things were going to take. I was like, I finished this book, and then it will take me a year or two to get an agent, and then maybe a year or two to get a book on the shelf. And I was just not happy with that. I'm someone who has a sort of bias for action. I like to get stuff done, get stuff out into the world and very project focused. And so I was like, well, I want this book out there. So I started looking at that point into what other people were doing. I joined the National Speakers Association, and pretty much, well, a lot of professional speakers use self-publishing as a way to make money at the back of the room. And I was like, okay, this looks interesting. It was also just happened to be so that was 2006. 2007 was when the iPhone and the Kindle were launched. And people forget this now, right? We're recording this in 2024. But before then, there were no ebooks. There was no digital audio. There was a whole load of stuff that didn't exist in terms of a mobile economy. Digital ebooks at the time were sort of downloadable PDFs. It wasn't a practical way to make a living. And I was like, oh, okay, the world is changing in terms of the ability to reach readers, especially those in America. So obviously I was living in Australia, very small market compared to the US. So I could see an opportunity there to start a business selling books to people abroad. And so that was the kind of beginning. But in terms of what I've done since, I do license my work in foreign languages, mainly to traditional publishers. And then, I mean, I can't speak to why people go one way or the other, but I think a lot of it comes down to your definition of success. For example, do you want a particular publisher's name on the spine? Do you want control over your books? Like, how much control do you want in terms of what you write, how you publish, how you do your book marketing, how you make your money? So yeah, there's pros and cons each way, I think.
Now, you write thrillers and dark fantasy books as J.F. Penn, in nonfiction as Joanna Penn. Are you using the initials because you don't want to be gender specific in case there's any kind of biases there? Or is there any strategic reason for using initials in one case when you're writing fiction?
Well, I think many authors use initials, and it's not to hide anything. I certainly don't hide who I am. But I started with nonfiction as Joanna Penn, and I wrote my first few novels under Joanna Penn. But I got to this sort of point of feeling like I needed to split my audience, and I'm so glad I did that. I think it's a trick for anyone. The people who read my fiction are almost completely different to the people who read my nonfiction as Joanna Penn, my books for authors, which are not really genre specific, whereas fiction readers like their genres. So I guess I wanted to have a different brand, and J.K. Rowling did very well with J.K. and J.F. are my initials. And also my name Joanna, I use Joe, and I was told that Joe is a man's name in the USA, and so to be Joe Penn, just J.O. Penn, would be kind of weird. So I wanted to go with J.F. Penn. I mean, I did have a few reviews in the early days around the action adventure thriller genre, which is primarily male dominated. But yeah, I hope it doesn't matter. I mean, people read books in general, but mainly it's to split the brand and be able to be a different person under my different websites, my different cover designs and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, but if you had been a man and you were writing romance, you might just want initials or even use a pseudonym. I don't think most people trust a man to write romance. So
I know a lot of male romance writers.
Do you? Okay. Do they write their own names, or do they tend to use pseudonyms?
No, I guess a lot of them do use initials, but I do know one romance writer who narrates his own audiobooks, and his readers love that.
Interesting. Now, you made the decision to be a genre writer. Was that a business decision, or was it strictly that, look, this is what I really love is thrillers and dark fantasy, or was it a combination of the two?
I think it's kind of an odd question, because to me, genre is just the category where you put a book in a bookstore. So,
but if you want to sell a lot of books, wouldn't you say that there are genres where people devour? Detective novels get devoured, romance novels get devoured, sci-fi gets devoured. People tend to read in a channel a lot of the time. I think more so than the people who read general fiction. Maybe you disagree, but
I think
Go
it's
ahead.
important to think about the book selling environment, which is if you go into a Barnes and Noble, there are shelves and there are shelves of all different kinds. So, for example, I write self-help. I also have a pilgrimage memoir, which goes in a very different category to, say, a horror novella. Well, in fact, horror novellas are very difficult to put into stores. But I mean, you're right. I have some thrillers. I have some dark fantasy, but I have kind of paranormal crime. And so I follow the muse in terms of what I write, specifically fiction, and I write what I love to read. So I don't write to market, as some people call it, in terms of my fiction. But what I do is I write a book and then I look for the right category to put it in on Amazon and that kind of thing. So in that way I do, but I do write across so many genres that it's more a case of having lots of different books and people discovering me across different ways. But I mean, the literary fiction is itself a genre. And within that, for example, a historical literary fiction is very different to say, a science fiction literary fiction book. So I feel like people can discover books in different ways. And I guess I write what I love to read.
Now, you did mention your memoir about a pilgrimage. Elaborate on that. What was the pilgrimage?
Well, the subtitle is Lessons Learned from Solo Walking Three Ancient Ways, and it's about three different pilgrimages, one of which is the Camino de Santiago, which I'm sure some people have heard of, and I walked it from Porto in Portugal up to Santiago de Compostela in Spain. And I have a master's degree in theology, and all my fiction is underpinned by a lot of ideas around religion and supernatural and all of that kind of thing, and religious history. And so I've always wanted to do that walk. And obviously the pandemic happened. And in the pandemic, I walked a couple of other pilgrimages here in the UK. And then as I got sick with COVID at one point, and as I lay there, very sick at the time, I was like, if I die, I'll be so annoyed that I haven't done that pilgrimage. so
Now,
as
that's a
soon as I
300-mile walk, isn't it? Something like 300
yeah,
miles?
yeah, exactly. So as soon
I
as I
know
was,
somebody who did that, trained for
mm,
it and did it, but that's amazing. And it does have religious connotations or theological connotations. It's connected to, was that a Christian pilgrimage back in the day or not?
yes, I mean, it still is really, although a lot of people are, I guess, seekers. I use the word seekers in my book. I mean, I consider myself more spiritual than religious. I'm not a
Hmm.
Christian. But yeah, I love cathedrals and sort of religious architecture and that kind of thing. So yeah, it was a really interesting journey. And at the end of it, I realized I had a memoir. So I wrote that, and I learned a lot around solo travel and midlife. I'm sure, you and a lot of people listening, when you're in your sort of mid 40s turning 50, you have a lot of things you want to think about. So yeah, that was my first memoir, and an important book to me, but again, this pilgrimage memoir is not really aimed to be a bestseller as such. But I launched that on Kickstarter, which is one of the ways you can self-publish, and did really well with people who are
Yeah.
interested in that kind of thing.
And it can be a bestseller because Bill Bryson did A Walk in the Woods, and was a huge seller. Everything he's written is a huge seller. About walking I think the Appalachian Trail, or something on that order. Now, as a spiritualist, do you meditate, or is walking your meditation?
Yeah, I mean, I walk for all kinds of
Meditative purpose.
reasons.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you meditate formally,
No,
cross-legged, sitting in a chair, anything like
no.
that, counting the breath? Okay. Okay. Because I ask in part because that often can feed writing. It's that going inside and being able to connect with the inner voice and so on and so forth. Um, Now, you have said that you believe that we're in the midst of a transformation in publishing. And I think you've already hinted at that, talking about these new technologies that allow a global presence. Is there more to be said, though? Can you elaborate on that?
Well, it's interesting because I feel like 15 years ago, I was part of the first wave of digital publishing, as we mentioned, ebooks, audiobooks. And now we're at the beginning of the next wave, which is really generative AI and the changes that are going to happen that way. Also, the platforms, Amazon's been the dominant platform for, again, like 15 years. And now it feels like things are changing in terms of the options for authors. So I mentioned Kickstarter. Many of us now have Shopify stores, we go direct to readers, some people selling on TikTok Shop and things like that. So there's a change in the technologies, but also in the mindset. I think independent creators are more empowered than ever to sell to their readers and to take control of their data and their customer experience. And so, yeah, it feels quite interesting to have witnessed that first shift and now this second big shift. I think many of us seeing AI right now as sort of the beginnings of the internet, how much that transformation will change things in the next 15, 20 years. It's kind of unknown. But if you look back at the last set of changes, it should be significant. So I'm excited. I think these changes are good for the industry.
Now, I also have heard you say that authors have never been more empowered than they are today. What are the tools of empowerment? I know you just mentioned some of them. Can you just kind of summarize for us what you see as the most powerful tools for an author to use to promote his or her books?
What's interesting, I think the tools change. I think what's more important is the mindset. So being empowered is about taking control of your author career, not waiting to be picked by anyone, but learning the skills you need for the craft and the business of writing, and then getting on with it, basically. So it's really deciding to learn whatever you want to learn. So for me, a lot of that was the digital publishing side originally. Podcasting, as you know, is a skill that you can learn, and interviewing people is a skill you can learn. Building my Shopify store was a really important skill for me in the last couple of years, learning how to do Kickstarter. So I think you have to have a mindset of, I will learn whatever I need to in order to achieve my creative goals, I guess.
Now, is there any singular tool that has done more for you than any other, that has sold more books or spread your name and helped brand you in a bigger way than any other?
Well, of course, we do have to say thanks to Amazon because they kind of single-handedly changed many of our lives. It's a love-hate
relationship, right?
Yeah, I mean, they really did pioneer the ability to sell books online, and it's a mixed blessing for many people. But bringing in the Kindle, Audible, there's a lot of ways that Amazon did change things, and I wouldn't be without Amazon, truly. But in terms of my own career, I do think podcasting has been a huge thing for me. I mean, maybe, well, I'll ask you, I guess, why did you start this podcast? I wonder if it's the same as why I started mine.
I think it was twofold for me. For one thing, it really it inspires me, listening to authors who have so many different ideas about how to write with power and so on, and then also getting my name out there. So it's kind of a twofold thing, both self-promotion, but also constant input from people like you and others who've got so much good advice.
Yeah, mine was similar, but also when I started my show back in 2009, I didn't know any other authors. And so I wanted to meet people. I wanted to make friends, which is it sounds kind of like, but I was lonely. I was in my day job. No one understood what it meant to write. And so I was like, well, what if I could speak to these people who also write, and I discovered through doing that, as I guess, you've written books as well, is that yes, it is special to write a book at the beginning, but once you become a sort of professional writer, you realize that you can do this, you can write a book and then another book, and you can talk to people more as peers, and then it becomes more of a professional network. So I feel like the connections I've made through the podcast have also resulted in friendships in real life, people who are very close friends now, who I maybe met on Twitter once when it was Twitter, and then spoke to on the podcast, and then met in real life at a conference. And so, yeah, I mean, it's difficult because I'm not saying that people listening should start a podcast. I am saying they should probably try and be on some podcasts, because I feel like audio is a really good way to connect with people.
Yes.
But yeah, I feel like getting my books out there all over the world, very important. And then choosing one way to market that you focus on. And for me, I chose podcasting. I do all the other things too. Well, not all the things, but quite a lot of other things.
A lot of them.
But yeah, but podcasting really, I think, is very powerful.
That's your core. Yeah. And the topics that I see, you have people on there talking about topics that are very like artificial intelligence, which you mentioned. Let me ask you about that. Do you use AI at all for your writing, or do you use it for other aspects of your business?
Yeah, I mean, we all use AI. I mean, Zoom has AI built in. If you use Amazon for anything, it's AI. If you use TikTok or Facebook or, any of the social media, if you use GPS, I mean, it's everywhere. You can't avoid it. If you mean generative AI.
Yes, generative AI. Exactly.
Yeah, so the kind of chat GPTs, Midjourney, yes. So I have been incorporating aspects of it into my process. I feel like as writers, we often work alone, and I have co-written some books and haven't found it a wonderful experience necessarily. But what I have chat for is a kind of mad, collaborative other, I want to say brain in inverted commas. So for example, this morning I was working on a scene and for my next novel, Spear of Destiny, and I had my character, she was in this room, and I needed her to have a fight with another person, and my character knows Krav Maga, and this other person had some other skills, and I sort of went on to chat, and I said, okay, so I've got this character with these skills, this character with these skills. Can you please give me 20 different fight scene moves that I can incorporate into the scene? This character has these skills. Can you give me 20 ways that they could get out of this cave at the bottom of this thing? So I often use it for lists of things, names of stuff, all kinds of aspects of plot and character and setting, or give me 20 other words for describing this dark wood. So it's sort of extended thesaurus. I also use Midjourney and DALL-E and some other things for doing images for social media. I've done some images for one of my short story covers, made a book trailer. So I use it for all kinds of things, as a sort of a help. Let's say a clever intern is one of the metaphors that people use,
Yes. Yeah. As a magazine editor, I use it for very much the same purpose of writing a headline and give me a headline with this word in it. And it will generate headlines, or, give me the pros and cons of this particular, hedge fund investing, let's say. And it really spurs thinking. It's not so much that you rip it and use it as much as it really it either supplies an answer, or it does give you an opportunity to spur your own thinking, because it is solitary. I mean, writing is a solitary. I mean, is writing solitary for you? Do you write sitting in a room alone?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I kind of feel like as an introvert, this is the perfect career. And yes, so this morning I write in the mornings. I was sitting here with my cat, who is here right now, Cashew, and I did my scene, and I have my book research going on. And yeah, I mean, I feel the same way about the AI tools. It's like a spark, and chat will give me a spark and I'll give it back a spark, and it will come up with things and I'll incorporate that. And so I actually really like it. And often, I'm sure you find this too, you end up laughing more than you would yourself.
Yes.
Because it comes up with stuff, or even the images, you're like, oh my goodness, how did you even come up with that? But I think it makes the process much more fun, and that's why I encourage authors to not be scared of this stuff, but to give it a go and kind of incorporate aspects into the creative process.
It's fun to use. It is fun to use.
You know it.
Yeah. And you can't really go wrong. I mean, if it comes out with tripe, you don't use it. If it comes out with something worthwhile, you use it, or you allow that to inspire your own take on it. You were an IT professional as an information technology. That is very, I don't know if I've been told physiologically this is not correct, but that's very left brain. Writing is an ideation for novels is very right brain. So you seem to have a technical aspect to your mind, as well as a creative aspect to it. I'm sure the IT background has helped you tremendously in terms of marketing yourself to all kinds of the different technical, social media and so on. Was that?
Well,
Yeah, go ahead, Joanna.
yeah, I mean, I can't say that it did. I was basically, I did, as I mentioned, a master's in theology at Oxford, and I was recruited into Accenture as it was at the time, Anderson Consulting, sorry, and then it became Accenture. So became a management consultant, and I got sent off as it was back in the 90s, late 90s, on Millennium Bug projects. I didn't know anything. I was an art student, and I got told to learn SAP, which is a software package that they use in big companies mainly. And I went into the financial area, and essentially I just learned this stuff. And you say it would help with things like marketing and social media. It has nothing to do with that. I was implementing accounts payable systems into these large corporates, like mining companies and stuff.
But you're very conversant with computers, with laptops, with the internet and all. More so than the average person.
It wasn't the internet. It wasn't the internet. It was sort of, back in even in the days of green screen and all that kind of thing. But also, I was never a technical consultant. I was what's called a functional consultant. So I would interview people in the business, and I would come up with ways you could use the software. So I was never a programmer or any of that. And so I want to encourage people that any of this stuff is learnable. I wasn't born knowing how to do marketing. I don't have a degree in marketing or a degree in English or writing or any of that. I've just learned this stuff along the way. And
so don't be intimidated. Everybody out there, don't be intimidated. I mean, I use the stuff too. And of course, I use technology in my day job as well. So it is not complicated. It's just a matter of actually the bigger part of it isn't actually posting. It's coming up with good ideas that capture people's attention.
And also just have a go at stuff, play with stuff. I feel like writers use it as an excuse. They'll be like, oh, I'm a creative person, I don't want to do any of the marketing or the business side. And it's like, okay, well, often that's when people do want a traditional publisher, because they can do that stuff for you. But for me, it's like, okay, well, for example, I want to build my own Shopify store because I can make 95% on sales. So yes, I will learn how to do that. And it took me a couple of months to build my stores and set it all up. But now I make money every day. You get paid every day.
While you're sleeping, you're making money while you sleep. And that's one of the keys to really being great at marketing and selling, is you want your systems out there making money while you sleep. That's really kind of the gold standard. Now, you get up in the morning and write. You were saying, how many hours a day do you write?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a kind of project-based person. So in the morning, I do creative things. In the afternoon, I do business and marketing generally. So at the moment, I'm in first draft phase for Spear of Destiny, which is my next ARKANE thriller. And so at the moment, I am every day I'm writing, including weekends. And I'll probably do maybe four hours total. And it's pretty intense. And then in the afternoons, I'll either be reading. So I'm reading a lot of books, doing other research, or like this is my afternoon, your morning. So I do podcasting and stuff in the afternoon. And then when the first draft is finished, I'll move on to editing. That will also be in the mornings. When I come to something like a launch phase, so a Kickstarter, I will spend that entire time on marketing. So I would say generally it's morning creative, afternoon business, but there are also different phases for the project. Or for example, the other week I did a research trip to Vienna and Nuremberg and Cologne. And that entire week was, I guess, creative and taking pictures and coming up with ideas. And so I guess there isn't an exact thing every single day. It just depends where I am in the cycle of each book.
Now, do you... Actually, my question is, what is a great day of writing for you? Have you had a day over the course of your life that the muse was there, that you hit a channel, you hit the vein, and you just had a phenomenal day of writing where you just turned out just a lot of great stuff? Or if that's not the case, what is a great day of writing for you? What's a success? Maybe not great, successful day of writing. How do you measure that? Is it volume? Is it quality? Is it how you feel at the end of it?
Yeah, I don't tend to measure things in days. I measure things in books or stories. So I have on my wall, actually, we're not on video, but it says, measure your life by what you create. And that is how I measure. I guess I look at things at the end of every year, and and then at the beginning, and I have goals around the books and the stories I want to write, and that's what I measure things on. So each day it might be a really disappointing day's writing, but every step is a step towards the finished book. And for me, I am most proud of a finished book. I mean, I love the idea process. So I was in Vienna and Nuremberg looking at the actual Spear of Destiny and the art bunkers where the Nazis had all the treasure and stuff. And that was really cool because I'm thinking of what the book will be. But first draft words for me is hard work. I mean, even after more than 40 books, it's hard work.
Yeah,
but I love editing. I love editing, and I love getting my book out there and into my readers' hands. So yeah, I think in bigger terms, really, in terms of the year and the books I create.
Do you write while you travel, or are you too busy collecting information and just the logistics of travel to write each day?
Yeah, I never, ever write when I'm traveling. I mean, I have a journal with me and I'll write down some ideas, but mostly I take a ton of pictures, like thousands of pictures of ridiculous things that, tiny, tiny things, even, food and bits on architecture and sculptures and books and people and just loads of stuff that may turn out to be useful for the book. And I put some of those on social media. I put them on Instagram at JF Penn Author if people are interested in Vienna and Nuremberg. But that's pretty much all. And then I kind of let it all settle. Sometimes my research trips don't appear in books until much later. So I was in Washington, D.C. just over a year ago, and I knew that there'd be a story that I wanted to tell, but I didn't know where it fitted. But as I was in Vienna, I realized how Washington is going to fit into this book. So it's a, international thriller. So I'll set some of it in Washington. But at the time, I didn't have a clue what that trip would be. And then later on, it's like your brain turns it into something quite cool.
Sounds really interesting, this research you're doing and what this book's going to become. Now, I've heard you advocate that you should be everywhere possible, which is made possible, of course, through social media and such, in every format possible, which would also include audiobooks. And you do audiobooks. Your titles are also in audio. Talk about how you go about that. Do you read your own audiobooks? Do you hire people to do the reading?
Yeah, it depends what it is. So Pilgrimage, my memoir I mentioned, I narrate that. I narrate my nonfiction. So Writing the Shadow was my last sort of psychology, self-help, creativity book. I narrated that. But my novels, I have different professional narrators. So, depending on the series. So there are, I hire them and they voice those. But yeah, also my short stories I've started reading myself because a lot of narrators don't want to take on a short story because it's too quick. But I certainly enjoy narrating. I have again, you can't see, but I have an audio booth set up here in my study, and I upskilled. I took classes, done a lot of work on upskilling into narration. One of the reasons is that I feel nonfiction and memoir, particularly, people want the voice of the author, but also you can make a lot more of the income if you narrate it yourself. So I kind of do a bit of a mix and match.
Gotcha. Now, you've already said, morning is writing and editing, and then you get into you've got the marketing and business later in the day. So you're a full-time, I mean, you're no dilettante. This is a full-time job for you. You fill your day with creating creative content, editing that content, and then promoting that content, marketing it, and handling the business aspect of things. So you're a full 8-hour a day person, just like the person who grabs a lunch bucket and goes and helps build a new structure.
Well, it's funny. I mean, my husband has a day job in the pharmaceutical industry, and I can tell you, I have, since I've run my own business, since I started writing in 2006-ish, I've worked far more than people who have a day job. This is one of the problems of running your own business, and especially as a writer, I think you never, ever turn your brain off. And of course, reading, which is my hobby and my love as well as for work, is also what I do for fun. So it's like, I do work too much, I think. That would be one issue. But I love it. So I wouldn't want it any other way. But I certainly worked fewer hours when I was a consultant. But this is how I feel like I'm much happier with my life. So I left my job in 2011, but before that I did, I guess 5 years working mornings, sort of 5 a.m. writing, when I got home from work, weekends. And then when I went full time, yeah, it's pretty much been full on since 2011.
Now, you have said, and I've heard other authors say this, that writing doesn't really get easier with time. It's still difficult, especially that first draft. But has writing become any faster for you over time? Have you been able to speed the process?
I think that as writers, we're always trying to challenge ourselves. So I think if it was just an easy book, I'm not sure I would do it. So, for example, the Pilgrimage memoir took years, and the first draft was like 120,000 words, which eventually ended up around 45. That was hard. That was a hardcore book to write and edit. My book, Writing the Shadow, turn your inner darkness into words, which was my last writing craft book. That one I've been thinking about pretty much since I studied Carl Jung's Shadow at school back when I was 18 here in the UK. And then I studied psychology of religion as well. So I've been thinking about that for like 30 years. So I feel like we choose projects based on the challenge that we want to face. And yeah, so I think that's why I pick books. And do we want them to be easy? I don't think so. Otherwise, we wouldn't be challenging ourselves. And part of the reason we are writers is to figure out what we think about things and to learn new stuff. So no, I don't think it's ever going to get easier necessarily or faster. And
Or
I guess
faster.
I don't need
Yeah.
it to.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the authors I had on said, one of the things I like about the writing is it's difficult. That's what I like about it. I want it to be difficult because it's just a challenge and it's accomplishment.
Exactly.
So how long does it typically take you to produce, or what is your time range for your typical novel? What length of time to produce it? Final draft.
Yeah, I mean, again, this book, Spear of Destiny, which is my next ARKANE thriller, it'll be book 13. I've been trying to figure out what book 13 would be for a couple of years. So the last novella, which was Tomb of Relics, was in 2021, I think. So it's been 3 years since I've written a book in that series. And my readers are like, I want what's happening to these characters. And I'm like, do you know, I don't know. So I've been kind of thinking about this for several years. And I mean, that's kind of how I work, is I have all this stuff going on in my brain. I have about 17 different projects that I'm kind of thinking about, and then I settle on one of them. And so once I settle on something, then I commit to the research, like the hardcore research, and then I commit to writing the first draft, and then I commit to booking my editor and finishing the book. So this one I guess I've been thinking about for several years, but then I actually committed to start it around the middle of January. So it's been a month. So it'd probably be 3 to 4 months end to end of hardcore committed writing and editing. Then a couple of months of hardcore, finishing it off and launching and publishing and all that. So I guess it's a sort of 3 to 6 month process once I'm actually committed to the book. But as I said, some of these books take years and years. And like Writing the Shadow, I had so many bits that I'd started writing over the years, and then I was like, not ready for that. So that's another thing I would say to people listening is, if you don't feel ready for a book, it may be that you need to write something else first, and then the book might emerge at another point, because you know how it is. Once you've written one book, you're bound to write another one.
Now, what is your best-selling book of them all? Is there one that's got the most unit sales?
Well, again, I mean, it's hard across a 15-year career, because obviously some of the earlier ones have sold a lot more than the one I wrote last year. So
True.
It doesn't really work like that. I mean, you could say, Pilgrimage did incredibly well in the religious memoir category. But I guess in terms of I mean, Stone of Fire is book one in my longest running series. So that has sold the most number of books because that is the one I focus on marketing primarily over everything else. And it's a book one in a long series. So you market that and you hope that some of those people go through and read other books. So that is Stone of Fire in my ARKANE series.
A lot of writers talk about having a muse. Do you have a muse?
I think it's curiosity. I just lean into whatever sparks my interest. And in that way, I'm like, okay, here's a thing. So, for example, the Spear of Destiny, the ARKANE series has a lot of religious artifacts and relics. I love religious relics. And I couldn't figure out what I wanted this book to be. I knew I had to set it in Vienna because I wanted to go to Vienna. And so I went looking in Vienna for something that might be interesting enough to write a story about. And that's when I discovered that the Spear of Destiny, which is the spear, supposedly, that the centurion pierced the side of Christ with. So it is like proper religious relic, is in the treasury in Vienna. And I was like, right, that's the book. And I knew it as soon as I discovered it. And I didn't know it was there. It was kind of there. And that's how I lean into ideas. Or, for example, my last short story, Beneath the Zoo, I heard about, I used to go to a zoo with my dad when my parents got divorced. And so it's a very emotional place. And I heard that they were demolishing it and building homes there. And so I felt this sort of melancholy around the destruction of the zoo. And then I thought, what will they find underneath the zoo? And that sparked an idea for a short story. So I guess my muse is just curiosity.
Now, how old were you when you realized that you wanted to pursue writing?
Oh, goodness. I think it's more that I was always a reader. Always loved books above anything else, above my soft toys when I was a toddler and all that kind of thing. And so, and then I wrote journals and everything, but I didn't believe that you could ever be a writer as a job. I think like many people. But it was realistically when I got to around the age of 30 and I just hated my job and I was desperate to find something else. And Tim Ferriss' 4-Hour Work Week came out around then. Don't know if you remember that book.
I do.
And
I read it.
And essentially it talked about lifestyle design and write down what you want your life to look like. And I wrote down, I want to read books and I want to travel and I like writing in my journal. So if I could read, write and travel, that would be my ideal job. And that's basically what I do.
And you're an inveterate, you're a traveler. You like to travel. That's one of your passions. And I'm sure that inspires a lot of creative ideas for your books as well. Is there well, let me ask you this. Just there's so many aspects to writing. There's mood, there's a place, there's characterization, there's dialogue. It goes on and on. What do you feel is your strongest? What's your superpower when it comes to writing? What's the strongest aspect of your writing? Is it dialogue? Is it creating characters? Is it sense of place?
Well, it's definitely not dialogue. I would say that I'm very good at sense of place because I travel and because place is so important to me. And also much of my story comes from place. So I'm pretty good at plot and setting, and then obviously characters in the setting to do with the plot. But I've always liked big stories. So I often, my stories often people die and things blow up, and they're very kind of James Bond style writing. There's nothing small in my books. They're all pretty big scope. But yes, I feel like
big scope in terms of themes and also just geography that
geography,
you're never in
sure,
just one place.
Yeah, geography and conspiracies that often sort of global people just trying to destroy the world or kill everyone in the world, and this kind of thing, or people. I mean, I really enjoy writing antagonists, the villains. I really enjoy that. I've always trying to come up with reasons why people want to destroy the world and then come up with plausible ways that they can do it. So writing's a lot of fun.
Now, you say definitely not dialogue. And you immediately made me think of Frederick Forsyth, who you may have read some of his novels. And he a British writer, doesn't really write anymore, but he had a bunch of best-selling novels back in the day, and almost entirely devoid of dialogue. And it made me wonder, does he feel that he's not good at dialogue, so he just takes command of the story and tells the story himself, or he just wants to be that steady hand at the wheel and making sure that the readers are in his steady hands from beginning to end, which today seems to be a very popular sort of thing. They like a narrator who's in charge of that story the whole time. Do you tend to? Well, let me leave it at that. How do you treat if you don't feel like you're particularly good at dialogue? How do you treat it?
Well, I have dialogue. Obviously, you need dialogue in fiction. But you asked what my superpower was. So, we have everything in our books, and we're better at some things than others. But also, I think we all have a voice, and my voice, I guess, a lot would be internal. I do write third person. I don't write first person. Except in sometimes some short stories, I guess, but third person limited. So I'm deep into the character viewpoint for the scenes. And yes, there's dialogue, but yeah, it isn't a superpower as such. I think people have their strengths, and our readers love what we write. So I've done a lot of study of dialogue. I write screenplays and all of that kind of thing. But I love to write a lot of the other stuff more, I guess.
Yeah, no, I understand. So let me ask you, what was the turning point in your writing life? Was there a time when you suddenly realized, I'm going to be okay at this, I'm good at this, and I'm going to be okay? Or was there a piece of advice you got along the way? Or was there a break you got along the way that was the turning point?
I think it was very early on. I mean, I made about $3 on Amazon in my first month. And I was like, $3? I made $3 from some Americans who don't know who I am.
They weren't even pounds, they were dollars. The Americans.
Well, I was also in Australia, but it was like, oh my goodness, I can put my words online, in an ebook, and someone's going to buy it and I get money. And it was like, well, if I can make $3, I can make $10, and then I can make 100, and then I can make 100 an hour. Or 1,000 an hour, or whatever. If you can see that you can sell a book to a person, you can sell it to more people. And of course, each book, there's varying sizes of audiences. But I think that was it. It was literally, if you want to do this for a living, you have to sell something, either to an agent or a publisher, or to another human as a reader. And that will be the marker that will help you keep going. I think that's the encouragement.
Yes. Now, why do you write? What are the psychic or emotional rewards of writing in your case? Now, you did say you love having a completed book. It is the actual process of writing. Do you feel that you get emotional rewards from that, or is it really the end product that's the payoff?
I think we all have a default method of thinking about the world, and mine is writing. So I do write journals, as I said, and I don't really know what I think unless I write about it. And I mean, all of my fiction, pretty much all of it, is a good versus evil, questions around what happens after death and all of that kind of thing. So big spiritual questions hidden under action, adventure, and fantasy and stuff like that. So I try and figure out things about the world through writing. And then, of course, my nonfiction goes into that in different ways. But yeah, I think it does help me consider how I think about certain aspects of life. I mean, Pilgrimage is a midlife memoir of a person who struggled with depression and came to some conclusions by walking a really long way. But the process of writing that book almost finished the experience for me, and obviously can help other people. So yeah, I mean, it is a wonderful career indeed.
Now, you had mentioned at one point as I alluded to just a moment ago, that you like that finished product. There's a famous writing quote: "I hate writing, I love having written." Is there any truth to that in your life?
Uh,
Or do you like the writing
no,
too? Do you love the writing as well as the
yeah,
finished product?
there's very little I don't love about my career.
What's your favorite writing quote? There's lots of writing quotes out there. Is there one that, oh, by the way, the quote, what you told me is a quote that I had collected from Joan Didion. She said the same thing you did, which is, I don't know what I think about anything until I write about it. And then there's
Hmm.
Susan Sontag, who said, the thing I love about writing is it forces me to pay attention to what's going on in the world. Is there a
Yes,
quotation though that you've heard over the years that made you say that stuck with you and made you think that's really a jewel of a writing quote?
I have so many. I've written, like 10 books for authors, and every single one is full of quotes. So I guess as we come to an end to the interview, I mean, I'll come back to the one on my wall, which is my quote, which is measure your life by what you create. And I guess that those are the words that I live by.
I love that. And I love it because it's applicable to so many things. I mean, whether you're a builder or you're a writer or you're a technologist or a school teacher or a mother raising children or a father, I should also add. Men should be more involved in their children's lives in many cases. Um, yeah, I know, Joanna, you're suffering with a cold, and I'm going to come up shorter on this podcast than most of them. I really appreciate the time. I wanted to ask you one more question, though. You studied theology at what you said, Oxford. So
Mhm.
you're obviously you went to a very good school. You're obviously very brainy and committed to the subject. Do you believe in the metaphysical? You call yourself spiritual, more spiritual person than religious. Do you believe in the metaphysical?
Oh yeah,
Do you
absolutely.
believe that
And
there's a higher divine will or a higher spirit? We don't have to call it God. There's a lot of names for it, but you believe it as life is a continuum, that we don't just expire because the body ceases to work.
oh no, I definitely, when the body's dead, I'm dead. But I definitely have had experiences where I say, and I say it a lot in my books, where the veil is thin, where I can almost touch something that's beyond what you can see. And in fact, my next nonfiction book will be about Gothic cathedrals, which it'll be a photography and essay book. And I have very much had some of those experiences in Gothic cathedrals, particularly here in Europe, as well as natural places. And yeah, moments where you're like, okay, I am beyond time here. I've stepped out of time, and I feel like there is much more than just me in this huge world. And so, yeah, but I think, again, coming back to why I write, a lot of it is trying to figure those big questions out and hopefully give people something to think about along the way.
Yes, yes. Well, actually, one more question. How do you think your writing, you're still a young woman. How do you think your writing will change as you get older? Do you expect it to change? Have you seen it change already? Because you've been writing for quite a while, and do you expect it to evolve or change in the next, let's say, think of Joanna Penn, JF Penn, 20 years from now. How will it change?
Mm. Well, I like that you say I'm a young woman, as I'm almost 50. But yeah, I mean, I see myself doing this until I die. But yeah, I mean, we all change. We're different people now than we were a couple of years ago, and I'll be a different person. And I think all I do each year is think about what, given the limited time we have upon the earth, what can I dedicate my time to that both satisfies what I want to create and also might be interesting or useful or entertaining or whatever for other people. And so I fully expect my writing to deepen. My book, Writing the Shadow, goes into this a lot about facing up to that shadow side of ourselves, bringing the richness of that darker side into the writing. I think I'm starting to finally become more confident in my craft, and I can tackle some of the bigger projects I'd like to do, which I haven't been able to because I wasn't such a good writer. And I'm getting better. We all get better with practice, and every book is more practice towards the next thing. So the Gothic Cathedral book, I've never done a photo book before, so I'll have to learn a lot about that in terms of production and all of that kind of thing. I love learning. So yeah, I'm just going to keep learning, keep creating, and we'll see what happens.
Yes. Joanna Penn of Bath, England. I literally have been pursuing you for a couple of years to get you on the program. I love what I see on your website and the productivity you have as a writer. Thank you very much for coming on the program and sharing yourself.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Mike.